So Dave, when you're talking to customers, what are some of the business challenges that they're actually looking to solve with mobility?
I guess different customers are looking to solve different problems, but there's some examples of that may be they're looking to increase their revenue, they're looking to decrease their costs. In some cases, they're looking to increase employee satisfaction, or increase compliance, or reduce risk, etc. But ultimately, I think a lot of these things can be summarised as looking for an increase in productivity. Is really what most people are looking for.
Sure, that's a pretty broad set of requirements and sort of challenges that people are facing. And I think you've said before that mobility is bigger than you think. What are some of the biggest misconceptions around what mobility is and how it relates back to those challenges?
Sure. Well, I think very quickly in the context of mobility, people jump to security, and in particular mobile device management and security and all the elements around that. What we believe is that that is an element of it, absolutely, but we look at the broader sense of mobility. So that is, how you conduct business, how you enable your users to do their jobs, how you ensure that your corporate information is secure, and elements such as that.
Scott, pretty consistent with the conversations you had?
Yeah, and I think Dave nailed it in terms of a lot of people look at mobility initiatives to try and unlock employee productivity. So they look to try and provide mobility solutions to their end users to make them more productive. But unfortunately, it's approached as a technology-first initiative as opposed to a people-first initiative. And I think if you come at it from a technology element, you really miss the wider opportunity in terms of people first and then technology solutions that support that, and really focusing on the end users, because ultimately, your business case is usually predicated on people and productivity. And if you don't focus in on people and productivity and making sure they are more productive at the end of the project or the initiative, you're going to miss the wider benefits for the organisation.
So if you think about the fact that what you've said is there's people, there's technology, there's process, pretty standard for any IT engagement, any sort of IT service that's been delivered. But when you get down to it, you've got IT people delivering it. Mm-hmm. So again, everyone jumps to what's the technical approach to actually solving this business problem. And again, people go to vendors and products. What would you say? Is it pretty fair to say that that's the biggest mistake that a lot of organisations make, and sort of is jumping straight to the technology and asking for vendor products or vendor solutions?
Yeah, you're spot on. Approaching it and just diving into the technology first and trying to go to market and find out a whole bunch of different technology solutions misses the wider opportunity. And it starts with stakeholder engagement in the business. So it starts about going into end user population, working out what people's requirements are, what they're trying to do as a business, what blockers are there in the technology solutions that the business currently provides that prevents people doing their job. And starting with the end users first and actually focusing on what their requirements are, but also bringing them into the actual technology initiative. So actually bringing stakeholders from the business into that initiative and actually working out what they want and bringing them on that journey, and then they communicate that back into the business is really important. One of the important things in terms of engaging the end user population is actually identifying the different types of roles and what sort of technology requirements that those roles require. So you might have people who are really mainly desk-bound in the office, and they might have a different set of requirements to people like a sales team that are highly mobile and spend a lot of time away from the office. And you want to keep those people out in front of end customers. So you want to keep that sales team as far away from the office as possible, but you need to make a computing experience, a holistic computing experience that's really simple for them to use, that they don't have to keep coming back to the office to input data or those sorts of things. So identifying users and segmenting them and trying to work out what they need is really important.
Would you say that it's about providing a consistent experience regardless of where you are?
Oh, absolutely.
And the device that you're accessing the information or the application on?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Scott, what you're talking about is different users accessing business applications from different devices, from different places, mobile sales forces. There's a reason that customers get hung up on security. Yep. So David talked about the fact that people jump straight to security as that's the focus of mobility. What's been your experience, Richard, in the way that customers sort of approach you as a security expert around their mobility strategy, and where do they get caught up and why?
Yeah, so what I find is that most organizations jump immediately to mobile device management, and they look at the fact that they're caught up on essentially how do I manage the phone? What happens if I lose the phone? They're actually really focused in on the actual device itself, and So where we need to, I guess, shift our context away from that and more towards the information that's on the phone, because that's the asset. The phone, the laptop, the tablet, they're interchangeable, and what we're finding is that our customers, the end users, they're shifting from one device to another device, sometimes up to 6 times a day.
Yeah.
And so it's about providing a consistent experience across those devices. And the security on the back end of that has to be frictionless. And what I mean by that is it has to be transparent to the end user. And so customers need to take the time actually to understand their data and begin to provide a platform that secures the experience and utilizes context through that process that allows them to potentially change that end user's experience based on where they are and potentially who they are.
That's great, but we're entering an environment where you have so many different types of devices. You have PCs and laptops, you have phones and tablets, you have wearable devices now. Is it, and understanding that there may be some real estate constraints around some wearable devices, but is it realistic to assume you can have a policy-based approach for a consistent experience over such a broad range of endpoint devices?
Can I jump in and answer that? I
Yeah.
think the answer is yes, because at the end of the day, the way customers are approaching mobility today is off the back of the way they've approached desktop management in the past, right? We spent a long time standardizing infrastructure to make it easy to manage. And then mobility does the exact opposite. So in that context, IT want control, they want compliance, they want auditability. But in a new mobile era, there's new types of devices that have new capabilities. So you need to provide a unified user access experience, but more context to the user experience. So if I'm on a tablet, I want it to know that I'm on a tablet and it's touch enabled. If I'm on a PC that has a mouse and a keyboard, then that experience should be contextualized to the peripherals that I have available to me. The same with wearables. Wearables are smaller real estate, but they're functional. So we do want to have some policy and auditability around those, because a lot of the time, reporting and auditability are far more important than access control. Access control is an IT department's ideal. End users don't care about that because they come from this commercialized consumer-grade experience.
So you talked about context, and I can see Richard chomping at the bit to jump in.
Well, I think we tend to get stuck on the device, right? And I think it actually becomes about the information. And I think the one thing that's really important is the policy should follow the information, right? So you have a piece of information in your organization, and as what we're seeing a lot is customers are starting to ask questions about data classification and understanding what data is in their environment. We have a lot of unstructured information today, and so customers are asking, how do I begin to wrap some structure around that information and then develop the appropriate policy? Once you can tag a piece of information with a particular policy or a particular, you can then decide where that information should reside. Can it be pushed down to a tablet? Can it be pushed down to a wearable, et cetera? Or is it company intellectual property that needs to stay internal? And so therefore, it's not about the device, it's about the information and who's accessing it.
I think that's an upcoming challenge for IT departments.
Absolutely.
Is mobility facilitates the explosion of data, but it's all in all these different repositories. And the rise of cloud with applications like software as a service is actually going to exacerbate that for IT departments, where you have data repositories sitting in the cloud, some on premise, some even residing on a device. But the business wants to make decisions on all of its data across all these different silos. And I think mobility has actually exacerbated that issue for IT departments as well.
You also find that by segregating it, so essentially talking data to the application as opposed to the device, kind of makes that challenge a lot more easier to resolve. So once again, you're not talking about the device. At the end of the day, you're consuming a service and data via any device. So being able to correlate your data to your application makes it an easier way to resolve that issue. From an Office 365 perspective, it's the actual security mechanisms are actually based around the application and the information around it. So things like data loss prevention, things like encryption within the actual service itself help facilitate that and allow for segregation between the actual device and the service where the information resides.
Based upon different information sets within the application
It can
itself?
be, yeah, definitely. one of the things that when I go talk to a customer, conversation does come up about security, but the first discussion is around productivity.
Yeah.
And as a business, how do I make more money? And that's the first conversation that I normally have with customers. I'm seeing it more and more. It's not really the first discussion is security. More often than not, you're talking to business representatives as opposed to IT people.
Yeah,
and IT people talk security. Sure, it is a fundamental part of the whole framework.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it shouldn't be a roadblock to my workforce becoming more productive. And that's more the conversation that I'm having, that I'm seeing nowadays. So I'm seeing a lot more businesses don't see security as being the roadblock anymore, or they don't want security to be the roadblock anymore. Nowadays there are a lot of solutions out there, such as what Richard's pointed out, that facilitate that and allow for compliance and allow for my data and my information to be secure.
Well, we're starting to see it. The platform has the security intrinsically built into it,
Yep.
right? And so more and more we're seeing our vendors come out with platforms that allow organizations to be more productive and have essentially what I like to call frictionless security in the background. So it's transparent to the end user, and it helps combat things like shadow IT, because what we've seen is, or as organizations try to become more productive, and particularly the marketing and all the different, all these non-IT related parts of the business, they're actually going outside of the organization to solve that problem.
On Greg's point, a lot of businesses we find will go and procure a bunch of what we call executive jewelry, like the shiny new device, and they think that's the mobility initiative. And I think Richard talked a part of it. We talked about data management. There's multiple elements to this in terms of depth of the solution required for mobility, and yes, the presentation device to the end user is part of that story, but it's actually not the total solution. There is much more to it in terms of security, data management, how you present the applications to the users, how users become more productive once you give them the device with that solution. There's multiple elements to that security story.